You do it before you even realize you are doing it. Someone walks into the room, and before they finish their first sentence, some part of your brain has already run the calculation. Are they doing better than you? Are they happier, thinner, more successful, more confident? You did not choose to run that calculation, it just ran. And the worst part, science says it always will. But here is the thing. The reason you compare yourself to others is not because you are insecure. It is not because social media broke your brain. It is not a personality flaw you inherited from a jealous parent or a competitive sibling. The reason is far older than any of that, and far stranger. It starts about 1.8 million years ago on a flat, dry stretch of what is now Eastern Africa. Your ancestors are not sitting at desks. They are not scrolling through anyone's highlight reel. They are scanning the horizon for threats, sleeping in shifts, and spending most of their waking hours in one of two modes, hungry or afraid. In this world, social rank is not a luxury. It is survival. The highest ranking members of the group eat first. They sleep in the safest positions. They get first access to mates. They receive protection when predators come. The lowest ranking members of the group get what is left over, which, in lean seasons, is sometimes nothing. This means your brain evolved to care obsessively, constantly, automatically, about one thing above almost everything else. Where do I stand? That question, where do I stand, is the original software running underneath everything you feel when you compare yourself to someone else. Leon Festinger, a social psychologist at MIT, was the first to formally name what your ancestors had been doing for 2 million years. In 1954, he published a paper introducing what he called social comparison theory. His core argument was simple and devastating. Human beings do not evaluate their own abilities, opinions, or worth in absolute terms. They evaluate them in relative terms, compared to other people. Think about that for a moment. You do not know if you are smart. You know if you are smarter than your classmates. You do not know if you are successful. You know if you are more or less successful than your colleagues. You do not experience your own life in isolation. You experience it as a position on a social leaderboard that never stops updating. Festinger discovered something else. When people want to evaluate themselves, they do not compare themselves to just anyone. They compare themselves to people who are similar to them. Similar in age, similar in background, similar in profession. Your brain does not ache when a billionaire has a private jet. It aches when your college roommate buys a house first. That is not pettiness. That is precision. Your ancient software is not tracking everyone. It is tracking the people in your immediate social group, the people whose rank is closest to yours, because those are the people whose position actually affects your standing. A random stranger on the other side of the planet is not competing with you for resources in your tribe, but the person sitting across from you at Thanksgiving dinner? That comparison matters, or at least some part of your brain believes it still does. Here is where it gets more complicated. Researchers distinguish between two kinds of social comparison. Upward comparison is when you measure yourself against someone who seems to be doing better. Downward comparison is when you measure yourself against someone who seems to be doing worse. Both are deeply human, and both serve a function. Upward comparison, when it does not spiral into envy, can work as motivation. You see someone who has done what you want to do, and some circuit in your brain fires with a quiet urgent signal. That could be you. That is attainable. Chase it. Research by Thomas Wills at Columbia in the 1980s mapped out how downward comparison works in the opposite direction, as a tool of comfort. When life feels overwhelming and your self-esteem is low, your brain finds relief in noting that someone else has it harder. It is not malicious. It is a primitive stabilizer, a way of telling your nervous system, you are still okay, you are still in the game. But here is the trap that no ancient brain was ever designed to escape. For 99.9% of human history, your social group was small. 50 people, maybe 150. Your brain ran its comparison calculations on a tiny, stable local sample. You saw the same faces every day. The rankings shifted slowly, and there was always something you had that your neighbor did not. Always some dimension where you came out ahead. You were faster or funnier or better at tracking deer. The score was never completely lopsided. Then you gave your ancient comparison brain access to 8 billion people simultaneously. Social media did not create the comparison instinct, it weaponized it. Suddenly, your brain is not comparing you to 50 people in your village. It is comparing you to the single most photogenic moment in the lives of millions of people, curated, filtered, staged, and timed for maximum impact. The highest earners are more visible than they have ever been. The most beautiful people are more visible. The most successful, the most traveled, the thinnest, the most in love, all of it packaged into a scrollable stream that your comparison brain processes as if it were your actual social reality. Psychologist Alex Jordan at Dartmouth ran a study in which participants dramatically overestimated how happy and socially fulfilled their peers were compared to how they actually felt themselves. The participants were not imagining this, they were responding accurately to the data they could see. The problem is that the data they could see was a distorted sample. People broadcast their peaks, they hide their valleys, and your brain running 2 million-year-old software on a modern feed cannot tell the difference between a performance and the truth. This is why comparison does not feel like a rational calculation. It feels like a gut punch. Because it is not happening in the rational part of your brain. It is happening in structures like the amygdala and the ventral striatum, regions that are old, fast, and completely indifferent to nuance. These regions do not pause to ask, is this person's life actually as perfect as it appears? They just process the signal. Someone else has more. You have less. Adjust your threat response accordingly. Ethan Cross at the University of Michigan has spent years studying how social comparison activates the brain's pain network. And the finding is not a metaphor. The feeling of being outranked or falling behind or failing to measure up registers in the brain in patterns nearly identical to physical pain. When you feel the sting of comparison, you are not being dramatic. You are being a human being. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. But here is the counterintuitive truth that your ancient brain cannot process on its own. The comparison instinct was calibrated for a world with a ceiling, a tribal world, a world where there were only so many people to compare yourself to, only so many dimensions of status, and where the rankings were close enough to reality that tracking them gave you genuinely useful information. That world no longer exists. The inputs have changed, the hardware has not. Every time you feel the pull of comparison, every time you glance at someone's LinkedIn update or Instagram grid or the size of their apartment, your brain is executing a survival program designed for a world that has been gone for 10,000 years. It is running ancient code in a radically modern environment. And it cannot flag the mismatch because it does not know the environment has changed. So what do you do with that? Awareness is the beginning, not cure, beginning. Knowing that the comparison instinct is a feature, not a bug, does not make it stop, but it shifts something. When you notice the calculation running, you can pause long enough to ask, what is this actually measuring? Is this a real signal about my real situation? Or is this an ancient threat response misfiring in a world my brain was never designed to navigate? Research points toward a third kind of comparison that may be the only one that genuinely helps. Not upward, not downward, but temporal. Comparing yourself to yourself. Who were you a year ago? What did you not know then that you know now? What could you not do then that you can do now? This comparison has a floor and a ceiling that your brain can actually make sense of. It tracks real progress. It does not depend on a curated feed or a shifting leaderboard or the performance someone else is putting on for their own audience. Your ancestors looked at the horizon and asked, "Where do I stand?" It was the right question for the world they were living in. You are living in a different world now. And maybe the question worth asking is not where do I stand compared to everyone else, but where am I standing compared to where I was? Tonight, when the pull of comparison hits, and it will, some part of your brain is still out there on the savannah, scanning the group, running the numbers, keeping score. That part of you is not broken. It is ancient. And it is doing exactly what kept your ancestors alive. The question is whether you are going to let 2 million-year-old software make decisions for a life it was never designed to understand.